And their number is 928-267-3411.
And thank you to One Tom Plumber for sponsoring our KRIM Community Spotlight program. Good morning, Rim Country. Chris Higgins in the studio on this beautiful Wednesday morning, broadcasting live from the Sawmill Theater Complex. And this morning's program, we have Banner Payson Medical Center in the studio on the third Wednesday of every month. And joining us this morning, CEO Hoyt Scaplin. Good morning, Hoyt.
Good morning, Chris. Thanks for having us.
Oh, you're so welcome. And also Carol Grush, who is an RN at Banner Payson Medical Center and the Senior Quality Safety and Infection Program Manager. So good morning, Carol.
Good morning.
All right, and we're going to be talking about what, goodness, I think everybody loves to talk about the flu. No, I'm joking. Hopefully, you know, you can get through, I know everyone hopes to get through with the winter without getting the flu, but unfortunately, it is something that happens. But we are going to be talking about tips. Carol is going to be sharing with everyone listening and watching on our KRIM Radio Facebook live stream as well about infection prevention tips. So I think there are things that you can do to help prevent getting the flu, right, Carol?
That's correct. Probably one of the biggest ones is to try and get your flu shot. It doesn't necessarily keep you from 100% getting the flu, but it makes it so it's not quite as bad. The other thing is, you know, frequent hand washing, taking care of yourself. You know, making sure you eat, making sure you drink, you know, fluids, and they take care of yourself. If you're sick, stay home. If you're around a bunch of people, make sure you wash your hands after you've been around those people. If somebody's coughing, try and encourage them not to cough on you, and cover their cough when they're coughing and sneezing around you.
Now, I know for some people, some of those tips, it might be easier depending on, say, for instance, your work environment. If you're a teacher or work at the schools, well, you're around a lot of little children possibly, or people that could be coughing, could be getting sick, could possibly be sick. So it might be a little bit harder in those situations than if you are working kind of away from people and aren't around a lot of people. Also the hospital, working at the hospital where predominantly people that are sick, you know, are coming to see you to get help.
I think one of the most common causes of getting the flu, in my opinion, from personal experience, particularly over the last couple of years watching what I do, it's eating. And you get some popcorn, you get things that you eat with your hands that, when you do alcohol-based hand rub, you have to have enough of it that you can cover
your hands.
Your fingernails are one of the places that bacteria are the worst, but when we're touching surfaces and doorknobs are terrible. Common areas where you place your hand and then we forget and we snack on something or we open a piece of gum, put it in, that it's that kind of contact.
Yeah, that's a part of it. You know, and another thing is, it used to be that we didn't wear masks. Masks do have some use, especially in our healthcare environment, that prevents, not only transmission from you to them, but it can kind of filter out what's in your environment. So, we'll be encouraging some of our staff may be masking at the hospital. So if you come to the hospital, you may see more masks. If you're a teacher and you have a lot of ill children, I know it's hard to teach with a mask on, and especially if you got anybody that has to do lip reading and that sort of thing. But it might be a thought to have a mask available. And if you're going to wear a mask, change it every so often, because they do get dirty and wet, and then they don't work as well.
One of the misunderstood food handling principles revolves around gloving.
Gloving. Yes.
I see it in a lot of, I love fast food, I admit it, I love food. Somehow we've taught people to believe that if I'm wearing gloves, I'm protecting the food.
Yeah.
It is such a misunderstanding. If those gloves touch a credit card,
Mhm.
They're contaminated.
contaminated.
Yes.
If they touch a desk, a surface, so when in the hospital, we know this when we're gloving for surgery or procedures, we have a very sophisticated, well, a sequenced process
Yes.
to wash our hands, how you put gloves on and they don't touch, they don't become contaminated. I think that many of us have misunderstood that, and so at events, people will put gloves on, but they're touching all types of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're really, and so gloves become actually worse than bare
They
hands,
can be a vector.
because you don't wash your gloved hands.
Mhm.
And so you can replace gloves frequently, but people don't do that. And they'll
Yeah.
put on one pair of gloves for an 8-hour shift. That's far worse than having regular pair of hands
Yeah.
and washing them frequently throughout your shift.
And gloves leak.
And closely.
I don't care, you know, surgery gloves or gloves that we wear in surgery, actually our surgeons actually double glove.
Okay.
But the surgery gloves have a pretty high tolerance for leaks. They're tested that way, they're manufactured that way. But your general gloves that you pull out of a box off of the wall can leak as much as 50%.
Mm.
Unless they're manufactured to that. So
Mhm.
that, you're right, people don't think that gloves, they think, oh, I'm totally protected. No, you're not. And then also, you know, when you got gloves on, your hands, what do? They sweat. And what do you have on your hands? You have bacteria on your hands and they just increase.
Yeah.
And now it just multiplies because it's in an environment.
Yes, it's
that's
dark, it's wet, and-
conducive to, yeah.
I mentioned
bacteria
this
growing.
because I had been at an event, a not-for-profit, best of intentions, in a serving line.
Mhm.
And so it gives this impression that we're doing everything for your safety, but then without training, people can end up unintentionally infecting themselves and others. So I'm just a huge advocate of hand washing
Mhm.
and being aware of any time that we are bringing food to our mouths.
Yeah.
And it's more frequent than we realize.
We touch our
Bubble
mouths,
gum,
yeah.
You know, unwrapping things, a sandwich, potato chips. So now, after the pandemic, I think I'm more conscious, I hope I am, of finger foods, which I love, and I think, wow, I gotta make sure I have in the car
Mhm.
alcohol by sunrub. And then there are some bacteria and viruses that alcohol doesn't kill.
Doesn't work, yeah.
Mhm.
And I think that's not well known to be, and it's usually the ones that are toughest.
Yeah, and some of our harder things to eliminate, or, yeah, we're
Mhm.
resistant to alcohol.
Mhm. So, so far this year, what have you seen at the hospital? Have there been a higher number of flu cases or average, or what have you experienced so far?
We have not seen a lot of flu
Okay.
lately.
Good. Okay.
You know, we kind of had a prolonged flu, you know, up until June,
Mhm.
you know, and even July, we were still testing positive, you know, people with flu. Here lately, like probably the last month, we've had very few positive flu. We are still in COVID,
Mhm.
yes, we get COVID probably every week we have 10 or 15 people that come in and get test positive.
Mhm.
The majority of those go home and they do just fine. Yes, they feel like they've been hit by a bus.
Mhm.
And they're sick, but they can stay out of the hospital. Every once in a while get somebody that's admitted, they have underlying health issues, they have lung problems or something like that, they'll get
Mhm.
admitted.
Mhm.
We're not seeing a lot of flu yet, but it's predicted to be a fairly heavy flu season.
Gotcha.
What about West Nile? That's interesting.
West Nile, yes, the county of West sent out a message, and I think they put it on Facebook, that they've had 3 cases of West Nile virus in Gila County
Mhm.
recently. West Nile virus is transmitted by our little friends, the mosquitoes.
Yeah.
So, you know, the only real protection on that is get rid of standing water, kill off the little mosquito larvae, wear your protective clothing, wear protective repellent and stuff like that. If you do get bit, you're not highly chance of, you have more chance of just having a bad, mosquito bite. You might have a chance of catching something, so, in West Nile virus, we would have to test for it.
Mhm.
And you might have, fever and headaches and body aches and that sort of thing.
Hmm. And how about with the recent fires that have been going on, the managed fires, the smoke, has that really added to or made it worse for infections at all? Or?
Well, I don't know that we're having infections per se from the smoke. Anybody that's sensitive to, you know, what is burning, there's a few people that have problems with cedar, you know, so when cedar burns, they have allergy kind of symptoms. Anybody that has underlying, like, you know, asthma, some of our asthmatics are having some difficulties with it, but it's pretty much they may have symptom control that needs to come in, and they may need to get some treatments and get some oxygen and some steroids and some other things to treat them. Some of our folks with, you know, heart conditions or COPD, which is kind of similar to asthma, they may be having a little bit harder time, but, you know, for true infections, the smoke's probably not contributing. It may trigger something that's underlying, so they may end up with some pneumonias down the line if they're having problems clearing their secretions and they're not breathing deeply.
That's what I was just looking at as far as the body, if it was fighting, you know, because of the smoke, making it harder, you know, for their lungs to work or something, and then opening the door for an infection to come in.
Yeah,
If normally the immune system could handle that.
I think that you make a good point, Chris, on that, and I think, and these, Carol was saying, one of the best ways to prevent a severe case of flu is to take care of yourself, and sleep is an under recognized strength against immunity. When even a few hours of sleep deprived, when you're just a little tired, the system's working overtime, you become a little more susceptible. And so, and if there's parents listening, they're like, "Are you kidding me, Hoyt? I can't sleep. I don't get enough hours of sleep." I remember having every day programmed just to where you're just exhausted. I can't imagine being a single parent and how hard that is. But if you can find a way to get at least consistent amount of sleep, it's invaluable in healing. In the hospital, we work hard to try to help people to sleep, and there's certain cells that only heal during sleep, and others heal best during sleep. And the body's a pretty amazing organism if we can help it.
I know, and that's where I thought you were maybe going when you said, you know, one of the big things, because sleeping, stress, just getting worn down. It seems like that's when I'm, you know, going to get sick is if I feel run down, I'm doing too much, not getting good sleep.
End of a good vacation, I find that's
vacations are.
Because you're flying, you're exhausted, the last day you didn't get a lot of sleep because you had to get up because of change of time zone, and then within 48 hours you get back to work and to home, and there's all this to do. Within 72 hours you're sick.
So you mentioned, Carol, about flu shot and getting the flu shot. Where can people go to get flu shots?
Flu shots are readily available. You know, sometimes the doctor's offices may have them, like if you're primary care, but, you know, Safeway, Walgreens, Walmart, Bashes are doing, you know, they're still, I haven't seen them, I don't know if they've set up their tables yet, but they will provide them. And, you know, most of our insurance, if you have insurance, most of it covers it. It's free. Sometimes if you don't have insurance, even then it's a minimal cost. So I would highly encourage it. I don't, you know, sometimes the health department will do clinics. I haven't seen them doing one in Payson yet this year, but I know they've done one. I think I saw one in Globe.
Okay, and at the beginning of the program you mentioned that people should not expect or get the flu shot thinking, oh, I'm not going to get the flu now, but it just will hopefully decrease the severity of the symptoms. So can you maybe explain why that is, and then also how there's so many different strains of the flu, and what goes into developing the flu vaccine for each year?
Yes. So let me kind of tackle that one a little bit. You know, our strains of flu, they are determined by the CDC primarily, but they really look at what's going on in the southern hemisphere. So they're seeing what's going on in Australia. So they're looking to see what strains are common then. They kind of look and see what the common strains were the previous flu season for us. So this year they've gone to what they call a trivalent rather than a quadrivalent. So they're going to be doing, there's 2 A's and 1 B. They took one of the B strains out of the particular vaccine this year. because we just hasn't circulated.
Mm,
So
okay.
why add, an
Mhm.
extra piece of, foreign material into your body?
Mhm.
And really, the flu vaccine is just to kind of stimulate your immunity, to kind of, get your immune system geared up
Mhm.
so that it can recognize an invader, which would be your flu virus,
Okay.
and then they can, attack it and wall it off and get
Mhm.
rid of it. It doesn't necessarily, like I said, it doesn't prevent the flu, but it would definitely, help you not have those kind of symptoms. So that, trying to get into immunology is a very, very in-depth and complex kind of, it's a study all of itself, and there's some, viruses are notorious for mutating.
Mhm.
They look at each other and they go, hey, I want to do this. So they change and they share some of their, DNA between each other, especially the A viruses. They can kind of mutate between themselves and they become more prolific and they can change how they behave. So that's why flu is hard to do much beyond giving you some immunity, because it changes so fast.
Mhm.
The COVID viruses is doing the same thing.
Mhm.
It's a virus. It looks and it says, hey, they've built up an immunity to me, I'm gonna change my strain and I'm gonna, turn into a G strain or whatever it's going to be. And so they wanna live, they
Yes.
wanna propagate, they wanna, they're organisms, they wanna live, they wanna survive, so they mutate, they change themselves.
Mhm.
Bacteria are a little bit easier to kind of have some, ways to prevent the illness. One of the primary ones is probably the bacteria, like meningococcal meningitis.
Mhm.
That's one that we've really pushed to get people, and that one does have more of a preventive factor to it, to
Mhm.
get that particular vaccine.
Mhm.
Because bacteria don't change
Gotcha.
quite as rapidly and crazily
Viruses.
as the viruses do.
Pneumococcal, and what's the chickenpox one? Shingles?
Shingles,
Mm.
those are all viruses,
Okay,
Mhm.
so there's vaccines that are intended to make it
much less,
less severe.
but they probably will not prevent it.
Yeah, viruses are pretty amazing.
Yeah,
How they adapt and change
Mhm.
and survival. You mentioned survive. They want to
Yeah.
survive. It is crazy when you think about viruses and over how many, the thousands
Yeah.
or tens of thousands or years, and just
Yeah.
changing, evolving, and surviving.
yeah,
Pretty crazy.
That which leads
organisms.
to a fairly natural desire to, when we have a patient come, we know when we have a bacteria, we do have treatments we can
Yeah.
prescribe antibiotics that will kill that bacteria. It's hard to decipher between bacteria and virus, and we end up over-prescribing, and bacteria do evolve.
yeah, they do evolve.
And we help them when we over-prescribe
Yeah.
antibiotics, and then we create these superbugs that
Yeah.
are immune to traditional antibiotics. And so even the bacteria can,
Yeah, they can take on, yeah,
he can evolve and
Yeah.
be slower, but we speed that when we over-medicate. So it's hard, when you go to your doctor, you get frustrated with your doctor, you're like, hey, I need my antibiotic, I always get this. And
Mhm.
the doctors are becoming more reluctant because they're realizing
Yeah.
they're not helping, they're actually causing much
Making
more
it worse.
dangerous strains.
So, and well, you bring up a great point. So what would maybe, and I know it has to be just very broad advice, but to somebody, as far as not wanting to over-medicate to where medication is, then it becomes ineffective, to that bacteria or, whatever you're trying to fight. So how does a person kind of know, okay, should I keep taking this? Should I let my immune system kind of build up?
well, primarily, so let's talk about, you have a virus.
Mhm.
You go in and you say, I want an antibiotic.
Mhm.
If you have no symptoms of an underlying bacterial infection,
Mhm.
meaning your sinuses are not infected, let's say, or you don't have a pneumonia, you shouldn't get an antibiotic.
Okay.
They may, with flu, we do have some, you know, the ACI, you know, have some medications that might help with that. We have the Paxlovid, that if you've got COVID, that it might kind of help with that. But it's antiviral type of things. If you go in and you have diagnosed true pneumonia, your chest x-ray says you have pneumonia, you have a fever, you have all those things, your doctor says you have pneumonia. Here is your 10 days, let's say, of your antibiotic. Take the 10 days. Take all of it.
No matter what.
Don't hold it back, set it on the shelf, and give it to your buddy,
Yeah,
or keep it for your next time, because you're just propagating your bacteria to go, hey, well, I'm kind of halfway cured, but I can now take on, you know, I'm going to change my gene structure and I'm going to become more resistant. And then you say, well, I've got this 3 days worth of antibiotics, let's say, sitting on the shelf, and I'm going to take it, and then you wonder why your doctor goes, really? You know, you shouldn't have done that. And here's a different antibiotic, and you're going to have to take it for 10 days. And if you keep, you know, going through this cycle, then you end up in the hospital with an IV, or you could end up with a PICC line in and go home with antibiotics for 6 weeks. So, you know, you need to try and make sure you complete all of your antibiotics.
And I will admit, I'm guilty of that. I have done that before because I start feeling better.
You start feeling better.
So day 6, 7, it's like, oh, I feel good, and why do I need to take these? So that's great that you share that, and you know, let people know why it's important to do that full regimen.
Finish the regimen.
Yeah, and it really needs to get rid of that, you know, your bacteria might be still sitting there in your, let's say, in your lungs or your sinuses, and it may take that 10 days of getting your blood levels, because it's got to get in your blood, and then it's got to get to the, you know, the site wherever your infection is, and then it's got to take on, you know, treating that infection and take those bacteria and kill them.
Wow. That's good. I needed to hear that. That was for me, Carol. I think that was for me, because sometimes I can be stubborn like that, to where if I start feeling better, I just think, why? Because, and it's funny because my wife tends to, the way she was raised was antibiotic. And I was really the opposite, you know, just kind of let it run its course, and unless it's very severe, then okay, you know, look at medical attention or the antibiotics. But fevers, that's how it was, you know, growing up, fevers, let it run its course, your body's fighting, where if you know, fight the fever, you know, let it go down, then your body can't fight whatever it's
And it does help, a fever does have partial use. It does increase the abilities of your body to fight off some of those bacteria and viruses. I will put one thing in here, talk about sepsis. Sepsis is one of our big pushes, you know, within our hospital. It is one of the key indicators that we look at. So, you know, you're saying, well, I'll just let it run its course, That's good and fine, but if it gets to the point where you are so sick, your fever is so high, if your blood pressure is low, your heart rate's high, you're dizzy, you're dehydrated, then you need to come see us.
Yes.
So that we can knock out the potential for sepsis.
I just had a friend recently that they suffered through and had sepsis, but to the point where they were hot, you know, fever, and just couldn't cool down. But she even, you know, made a phone call and could barely even talk at that point. And, you know, daughter came over and got her, you know, called, you know, the ambulance and everything. But and then she found out it was sepsis with something else. I forget what it was, but maybe pneumonia. Sepsis and pneumonia. But it was crazy just how severe and how quickly it came on.
Like a volcano, it's quiet and you hear rumblings. And
so, you know, for people that have sepsis that come into the hospital, there's certain triggers that we have within our medical record system based on, you know, your vital signs pretty much. So if you've got a high fever or a very low fever, sepsis can be either way, because sometimes you burned your, you know, your fever's been high enough, and then you get to the point where your body has gotten to where it will have none of that response, and you have a low temperature. And if your blood pressure is really low and your heart rate's high, and then there's some other things, if we draw some labs and your white count is high, that will, there's certain things that will trigger what we call a sepsis alert. So we have certain alerts, and we have certain time frames that we have to act to check on you and do blood work and get you started on antibiotics like immediately.
And I had asked her because I still don't know exactly what is sepsis.
Yeah.
So what is it?
It's a physiological response to, some sort of infection.
Okay, infection. Wow.
It's physiological.
Uh-huh.
So it is, like I said, it's a very low blood pressure, usually have a very low blood pressure, have a high heart rate. You may or may not have a high temperature.
Mm-hmm.
And if we do a blood count, you may have a high, white count. We also look for something called lactate, which is a metabolic precursor that says that if you've got a high lactate, that means that your body's not functioning correctly. And then if you've got a high lactate, then that's another indicator that your tissues and your cells are, going down into a bad situation.
And sepsis is essentially a blood infection in a way. It gets into organs, and so you end up with an extensive infection throughout your body. Sepsis typically, essentially.
Yeah, well, it's your physiologic response to, a bad event that's happening, and it can affect your kidneys, and it can affect your heart, and,
it can be very
it
deadly.
can be very,
unchecked.
yeah, if we don't catch it quickly, and that's one of our goals, is we catch it as quick as possible, and we have, a lot of performance improvement kind of things that we talk about. We have what we call evidence-based medicine and bundles of things that we do on sepsis. And so it's pretty much that first moment that you hit our doors, the stopwatch starts, and we've got things that we need to get done. And we're doing very well on our sepsis.
well.
And it is, nationally, it's recognized as a big push for CMS and Medicaid, Medicare, and all of those, that sepsis is a high priority, and there's people that are dying from sepsis that is unrecognized. So it's a big national push.
And that's what I was just going to ask. Is it mainly because it's unrecognized, or maybe people
It's not.
ignore some of these
And that can be
signs?
part of it.
Okay.
My mother has a challenge with lingering urinary tract and bladder infections, just due to just giving birth to 5 children and wearing her body out. My sister found her unresponsive in her rocking chair when she didn't answer the phone. And she was septic, brought her to the emergency department, and very fortunate, and they just said if you wouldn't have checked on her within that 30-minute window, she probably would have passed away from sepsis, from which originated from a bladder infection, with someone who was older, not mobile, living on their own, safely and able, but now not feeling well, not a high fever. So it's one of those things, is when you're not feeling well and you know something's not just right, tell others, and then go see primary care provider or urgent care, just to be safe.
Well, and when we start not feeling well, we have a tendency not to eat. We have a tendency not to drink appropriate amounts of fluids. And, water is one of the best things to drink. Make sure it's to, keep hydrated. And especially for, like your sepsis and some other things, that's where it's really a key piece.
And I think that's important that you mentioned that, especially going into winter.
Yes.
Because I know I'm not alone where it's just harder for me to drink water in the wintertime. Summertime, you're sweating, you're out doing, different activities, you think, oh, drink water, but in the wintertime, you tend to, I'm not hot, I don't need to drink water.
We become dehydrated more in colder weather. We are indoors,
Yeah.
touching more doorknobs and breathing on one another in colder weather. It makes sense. And it's been a warm September so far. So not surprised that we're not seeing an early flu. But as it gets colder, the temperatures dip, and we spend more time indoors rather than outdoors. And we don't pay attention to these small suggestions that our expert infection preventionist has shared today. We end up feeling sick more often than we should.
Yes. Well, just like that, 10:30.
Yeah.
My goodness, I know. This
fast.
is great.
We're
Thank you. And it's,
You're welcome.
hopefully, if you're listening or again watching, You don't have to meet Carol, because if you do, you probably have the flu or an infection or something that's pretty bad. But if also, I know Hoyt said you like to,
She rounds
travel or make
throughout
your
the hospital.
rounds
Yeah.
around the hospital. So if you see Carol in that way, then hey, say hi,
Yeah.
and don't run
Yeah.
from her because of what I said. But again, I think people should realize and feel safer knowing that you're at Banner Payson Medical Center as the Senior Quality Safety and Infection Program Manager, and that you're providing care to patients that come in that need this care, need
Yeah.
someone that knows, what they're looking at and what to look for and how to treat those people.
Yeah.
So we're very fortunate to have you, Carol.
Yeah.
So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, and thank you, Hoyt.
Always a pleasure.
Yes.
Always a pleasure to come with Carol. She's a godsend for us. We're grateful to have her, and a retired Navy veteran and nursing, and we love Carol. We call her Good Catch Carol because she's catching opportunities every day that help us be better and to avoid any error or opportunity. So she helps us with hand washing audits, make sure we're washing our hands to protect ourselves and our patients. She's a gem. We're fortunate to have her, and grateful to you, Chris, to have this KRIM, to have this
Thank you.
program.
No, you're very welcome. Thank you. Thank you, everyone also listening and watching today. And thank you to One Tom Plumber for sponsoring our KRIM Community Spotlight program. Time to get back to the music here on KRIM with Al Stewart, Paul McCartney and Wings, ZZ Top, and more. But first, let's get a quick update from the National Weather Service.
With this morning's KRIM weather forecast,